Okay, good. It looks like we have a pretty good audience today. So I'll start kicking things off here. First off, hi everyone. Thanks for registering and for attending today's webinar, focused on, of course, identifying the root cause of remote worker Citrix performance issues. I'll do some quick introductions first. My name is John Grant in the lower right hand. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Goliath Technologies. Also joining me today is Joe Lacalandra, one of our senior client success executives as well. So the two of us will be your hosts for today, and Joe is going to be focusing and digging into the use case specifically around troubleshooting remote worker issues, which is a topic which is relevant for pretty much everyone in the civilized world due to the obvious developments around the pandemic and just the emergence and evolution of remote workspaces over the last few years. So we're excited to dig into this very relevant and highly sought after topic. So we'll kick things off now. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. We'll quickly start up, really quickly get housekeeping items out of the way so we can get to the meat of the topic today. During the course of the session, we try to make these sessions as productive use of time as possible, both for you and of course for us as well. And so one big way we do that is by incorporating questions that folks come up with and have during the session. And so please feel free. In fact, we would encourage you to submit questions throughout the course of the session. If we can work it in during the course of the session, we'll try to, but that's not always easy. So at the very end, we'll go over the submitted questions that have been inserted over the course of the session and cover those to satisfy your curiosity in different areas. So please, I encourage you to do that. Finally, you will get a recording after this webinar. So should you be pulled away by some operational item, or if you'd like to share it internally, you'll have the ability to do that and get an auto-generated email to that effect. So let's get started, shall we? So again, thank you everyone for joining. The slide here lays out a very quick agenda to talk about this topic and drill into it quickly. And in particular, we're focusing on how to troubleshoot and improve root cause of remote Citrix user experience issues. The flow of it, we'll talk about first, what is the issue, and explain the remote worker challenge in the context of one of our customers, Maimonides Medical Center out of Brooklyn, New York, which is a really good example, sort of a poster child for the challenge that many are facing today. We'll talk about why this is an issue and explain what drives it. And then we'll talk about the how in terms of how folks solve for this inherent complexity as it relates to software. And then I'll hand things over to Joe Lacalandra, who I just introduced, who will dig into this use case in more detail and talk about how Maimonides effectively solved this problem in a way that they're very happy and pleased with. So we're excited to dig into this. So first off, the challenge around remote workers. And this is one that is not specific to Maimonides, and anyone, any organization really has had to deal with the supporting remote workers performing their jobs outside of the office, or in this case, in the Maimonides case, clinical setting. And in their case, they were forced to increase their support for the operations side of the organization. All their clinical users had always used Citrix to access health record applications and the like, but COVID required them to enable remote access for operations folks, finance folks, billing folks, and others. What happened is, because of that change and that shift, they started to get a lot of complaints around slowness, very vague complaints without a specific root cause or identity or root cause identified. And what happened was, because of the difficulty addressing that and because of everything that was involved in the potential cause, it caused all of these tickets to get escalated to third-line engineers. And help desk really wasn't able to support them. And before they knew it, they had no way to go out back after. They had no way, first, to resolve them immediately, and second, they didn't have any ability to actually resolve them after the fact. And those tickets and issues piled up. Now, why is this? Why is it that this expansion caused such an issue? Well, before we jump into that, we should understand exactly what was taking place. And what was happening is that there was a tremendous lack of visibility to answer remote users when they called in. They had some tools, they had a director, and they had some other monitoring technologies, but it didn't give them the answers they needed to answer these kinds of remote complaints. This ambiguity caused a breakdown in communication, both between IT support and the end user, as well as actually internally as well. And by the time level 3 engineering and architecture would get involved, there were gaps in historical and objective data. So they had very little to go on to actually put in place a fix, causing these to simply pile up and end. ultimately, they had nothing to rely on to address these issues other than subjective feedback from end users, and nothing that they could really stand on to take firm action that gave them any certainty of a result that would address the issue. And so, and the reason for this, and the reason these kind of challenges and pain points have evolved for so many, is because there is an inherent complexity with a Citrix environment, because it involves 15 or more unrelated vendors to work together successfully to provide a good user experience. You know, if you look on the left-hand side, you have your end users coming in remotely. Sometimes they're coming in from home, other times they're mobile. Some users are coming in the office or hospital settings, and they're all traversing the environment and touching a lot of infrastructure components, not to mention receiver at the endpoint, the actual network. This is, of course, an ICA session, which then is supported by the various Citrix infrastructure systems and components, and furthermore by the underlying infrastructure. Now, all these systems have some kind of native utilities, and many organizations, like Maimonides, had monitoring technologies that were historically focused on server or network monitoring. But the reality is that those only look at pieces of the infrastructure, and they only look really at the infrastructure components, meaning that it leaves the administrator to fill in a myriad of missing Swiss cheese gaps that are not accounted for, nor does it tell them what the actual end user experience is like. And as a result, when issues arise, it is almost always a daunting task, if not an impossible one, for an administrator to reasonably support these kinds of issues, especially when they're not always consistent and they're not happening every day in a easily discernible pattern. And so the solution to address this kind of an issue and enable IT to actually provide a user experience and address these issues is software, and specifically software with embedded intelligence and automation for the specific architecture and platform, and designed to help IT solve and address user experience issues. This slide has a lot of text on it, I know, but if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see a column that talks about specific the predominant categories of user experience complaints or tickets that may get filed. Users can't log in properly. If they can log in, it's slow or drawn out, or when they're inside of their session, it's slow, laggy, latency, keyboard, mouse, like that kind of thing. Now on the right-hand side, we know that so many of these components that we just looked at in the last slide are responsible and have an impact on driving the actual user experience. And so when we talk about software with embedded intelligence and automation, one of the things we'll talk about is how Goliath automatically looks for all of these specific purpose-built failure points and conditions that have an impact and drive user experience on the left-hand side. And so the technology automatically fills in those gaps, automatically out of the box will look for these failure points in a way that will then allow an administrator to both see the root cause of an issue very quickly when they need to analyze, and actually be alerted in advance of a user actually being impacted. And so ultimately, as a result of this, the goal here is, and the reason why so many customers leverage the technology is because this purpose-built software gives the administrator the ability to do these three things: actually anticipate an issue for a change and get ahead of one before the ticket gets filed, and hopefully put in place a fix. When they do have to analyze an issue, troubleshoot it quickly and have the right information to answer questions which previously had been unanswerable, and do it quickly. And then finally, prove it. To be able to document with objective evidence, stand on your decisions with data, and show historically how the environment is trending, so that you can then distribute that information, prove you're doing a good job, or prove you're making the right decisions, and not have to guess at it. And so with that, what I'd like to do is then transition back to Maimonides, since there's such a good example of this exact dynamic, which has been repeated throughout the marketplace with organizations utilizing Citrix virtual apps and desktops. And so what I'm going to hand it off to Joe in just a moment here, so he can go into exactly what they did to solve those complaints and those issues that they were starting to face once they began to roll out the remote worker platform. Joe?
Thank you, John. And I think that was a really great precursor to the use case that we want to talk about today with Maimonides Medical Center. Obviously, anyone who's on this call, if you're supporting your end users at this point, there's a good chance that many of them are working remotely, and there are obviously challenges that come along with supporting remote workers. So we're going to talk specifically about Maimonides Medical Center, the challenges they were facing, and also how we were able to help them solve it. So going back to the top of the webinar, when we talked about the challenges they were having with remote workers, they came to us about a year and a half ago, once COVID had started. They had to transition everyone from working on site to working remotely pretty much overnight. So while they were already leveraging Citrix Zen app and Zen desktop, many of their users were not using before. The IT team needed visibility into user experience, and you just are not able to get that without a purpose-built tool to look at all those elements and bring them into a single pane of glass. So what we were able to do is deploy our technology in less than 2 hours. We're able to automatically discover the entire Citrix environment. We're able to apply our embedded intelligence and automation across that environment to automatically be looking for different events, conditions, and failure points that can all cause end user experience issues. And we were able to help them alert the team prior to some users being impacted. Digging in specifically to their to Maimonides use case here, we were able to help empower their help desk to solve more tickets and really dig in with our embedded intelligence to show them exactly how easy it is to find root cause. We're able to get visibility into several different IT elements in a single pane of glass. We're able to give them objective data to share with their end users and internally, and access to historical data so they can track and trend and actually see how well they're doing versus the marketplace. So with that, let's jump in to the live IT environment over at Maimonides Medical Center, and let's talk a little bit and show you how we were able to help them use the technology to be able to troubleshoot these issues. So one of the big points that we want to talk about today is that you don't necessarily have to be a Citrix expert to be able to solve issues when it comes to Citrix. Our technology discovers the entire environment, and with that embedded intelligence automation, we're able to display to you in a single view all of your Citrix user sessions, both real-time and historical. So not only are you able to track and trend user experience data happening right now, but able to look back the week before, the month before, and be able to identify where trends are and what users are actually having poor performance. So from this one screen, Maimonides Medical Center, in just a couple of clicks, we're able to find a user that had placed a support ticket. They were able to type in their name. They were able to find the exact session that the user was complaining about. And then in just another click, they were able to pull up a screen within the technology that gives all of the relevant user experience data that is necessary for troubleshooting this user's complaint. So again, going back to before, not having to look in different products or different tabs to be able to find the information that you have, they had everything in one single pane of glass. They had a look at their logon times, the performance of the data center, the performance of Citrix, different processes that are running within that Citrix, that user session. But most importantly, in just another click, they were able to identify that, yes, this user actually was having performance issues. They were able to look from this summary tab here at a metric called ICA round trip time. And for those of you who are not familiar with ICA round trip time, it's the time it takes for a user to take an action and for it to display back onto their screen. So they were able to take a look and trend this data for the time frame of that user session and identify that at 10:56, this user was experiencing round trip time that was above a critical threshold. And with our embedded intelligence, we're able to show help desk exactly what those thresholds are, so it's really easy for them to confirm or deny that a user was having a problem. So right away, they were able to confirm that, yes, indeed, this user that placed that support ticket in was having an issue at 10:56. So now to go about actually finding out the problem, they're able to use the information that's right in the same screen. They're able to see the performance of the session host, performance of the hypervisor host, but most uniquely And when it comes to remote workers, they're able to see the connection of the user from their location. And that's what this connection speed out metric is right here. And just from looking at this one screen, I can see at 10:56, when we identified that performance was at its worst, we can see that connection speed took a major dip. And if we click in here, we can see that it was at 25 megabits per second, which is really good. And it took a major dive down below the critical threshold. At 10:56, we can see that user connection speed was about 3.5 megabits per second. So in just a couple of clicks, Help Desk was able to use this information to quickly find root cause and have a productive conversation with that end user to show them exactly what the problem was, and use this objective evidence to speak to the end user, share it internally. Any one of these screens on here can be captured, whether that's by printing, by taking a screen grab, and share that information. It's allowed them to be able to have more productive conversations with their end users and actually help their users improve their home working environment, which they've told me has been a major success with them internally. So they've taken some of the pressure off of level 3 and empower the help desk to be able to solve more issues. Now, the example that we just gave is a common one, and it's one that I think IT isn't able to show that to an end user without the objective evidence. You may have an inkling that, okay, you're working from home, and I can see that here. I can see, the client IP address here. I can confirm that they're working from home. I can see exactly how they connected in, so it's through the NetScaler, so I know they're external. And now I'm actually able to show them exactly what their connection was at home, so they can help put permanent fix actions in place. Now, when it comes to identifying and troubleshooting a remote worker's complaints, it's not always the user connection. It may be a lot of the times, but it's not always going to be the case. So what we're also able to do is bring you the performance of the infrastructure all into the same view. So in this single view where we can see that round trip time was high at 10:56, we can also trend the performance of the application server that was hosting the session. And I can see that not only was connection speed low, but the performance of the data center, and specifically that application server, was poor as well too. And if I click on this here, I can see at 10:56 that CPU was driven up over 90% on the session host. I can look at the hypervisor host, and I can also see that memory on the hypervisor host was playing an issue. So it's not always going to be the user connection speed from home. It can be various other things, but the idea is that you have all this information in a single pane of glass. And in most cases like this one we just showed you, in just a couple of clicks, IT is able to quickly find what the root cause was, share that with the end user, and then put fix actions into place. So not only are we giving you this information to help you be able to troubleshoot, real-time user complaints, and potentially get ahead of those with proactive alerting, but our technology is able to document the user experience with data and analytics, and we're able to show you how well you're doing versus the marketplace. And one of those reports that we have with the technology is called our Citrix End User Experience Scorecard. And what we're doing is we're showing you all of your user data into one view here, and we're applying industry best practices and standards for each of those different user experience metrics that we have, whether that's connection speed, round trip time like we talked about, ICA latency, network latency, and we're bringing that all into one view so IT has an objective look at how well they're doing from a user experience sake, so you can show to management, okay, look how well we're doing here, or maybe this is what we have to improve on. Or maybe IT can use this data to further their discussion with their end users who are working from home and show them, well, I can see your connection speed over the past 30 days is an average of just 3.5 megabits per second. You really need to do something about your home network. And having this objective look at user experience and being able to help IT troubleshoot remote workers has really allowed us to be able to extend ourselves not just to the enterprise and work with some of the largest Citrix environments within the country, but we also have the ease of use and price point to be able to scale to small and medium-sized businesses as well. So with that, John, I'll turn it back over to you. I know that we had a lot of questions come in throughout the webinar, so maybe we can start talking, we can start answering some of those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do. Thanks, Joe. And what I'll do, Joe, is just for the sake of organization, is I'll answer a couple initially that I can field, and then I'll hand a couple off to you, and I'll call you out so you can respond with the response. Okay?
Absolutely.
Sure. Okay, good. We had a couple initial questions here around, Joe, your presentation. Thank you again. One of the questions that we got was whether Help Desk actually uses your product. Okay, and I like this question, and that's why I sort of wasn't the first question, but I'm answering it first because it's a really legitimate question. And the reason is Help Desk historically has usually played very little role in Citrix because of the knowledge that's historically been needed. And folks in level 1, level 2 typically may not have that background. And the answer is yes. And part of it is because, and that's actually something I think is an accomplishment to be proud of in terms of the technology, because it has, like Joe just said, an ease of use profile that enables it to be used widely, and it has embedded intelligence included. But a couple of things you may not know that may contribute to this too that are meaningful is that the technology also includes role-based access control, so that different organizations that can have, different staff members can have different logon rights. And so, Help Desk may only have read-only access rights to certain segments, whereas administrators or architects, directors may have more administrative level access. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we actually provide Help Desk with different types of training, but we also provide Help Desk specific training. The reason is if Help Desk is able to resolve more issues initially, that significantly reduces resolution time, lowers the cost of IT support, and it results in happier users. And so what we do is we focus Help Desk on utilizing, specifically looking at the user sessions and enabling them to have immediate user response, or have the ability to do a couple simple things and analyze whether a slowness issue a user is calling in about is because of something IT needs to worry about, or whether it's something that's specific to a remote user, and actually have a conversation with them about it and talk a user through it. That changes the way end users and the organization perceives IT, just the ability to have that kind of intelligent conversation. And what happens is many of our customers, Maimonides prime among them, has been able to resolve the majority of issues right away, just by having the ability to have a little bit of training and focus Help Desk on achieving a couple things before they escalate some kind of issue. So the answer is yes, and it's also one of the only technologies that's really been able to accomplish that, because of, like Joe said, the level of correlation, embedded intelligence, and automation that makes that possible. Great question, by the way. Okay, the second question we have is, Joe, I'll call you out for this one. What does this product look like? And what options do you have? Is it on-premise or hosted, etc.? You can take that one, Joe?
Sure thing, John. The great thing is it can be either. So it is a 2-server architecture. It's mainly a server and a database, which can be hosted within your data center, whether that's on-premise or in the cloud. And it's also offered as a managed service. So Goliath can host your server for you and host the product for you and deliver it as a remote monitoring and management service.
Great. So both sides of the coin there. Okay, good. So the next two questions are kind of interesting. They kind of look at it from two different perspectives. The first one is the user comments, the data looks really great, but can I set alerts to trigger with specific times from our environment, or I think they mean like thresholds from our environment for logon times and latency metrics? Joe?
The answer is absolutely yes. Just about all of the metrics that you saw today are monitored automatically, and you can adjust any of the thresholds that come with the technology. So, for example, if you wanted to set a time for specific sustained latency, so you wanted to be alerted every time a user, like we saw today with Maimonides, where a user had over 500 milliseconds of latency, IT can be sent a proactive alert, and it can be adjusted. But the important thing here is that the technology comes with the embedded intelligence, and it knows exactly what to monitor for and how to monitor it.
Right. And I think that's a great point. Not just that logon times or latency are above a point where you're going to have an issue, but hopefully know about it when it's graduating to that level, so you know about it earlier, and then also marry it with monitoring that's actually looking at all the underlying components that could be driving that. So hopefully you can skip ahead right to root cause analysis, which is why it has 300 or 400 embedded monitoring rules and alerts out of the box, looking at those failure points. All right, good question. Another question we had here was, have you been able to prove that it's a remote user's internet connection that was the reason for session slowness? And I know you talked a bit about that, Joe, but if maybe just a quick soundbite recap to focus on that specifically.
Absolutely. So obviously we had the example on today's webinar, but we have customers all the time that obviously face this use case, and they're able to use the data and the information and the technology to be able to do that quickly. And if we jump back in, really quickly, you again have this connection speed out metric within the technology, which is really unique to Goliath, where it's giving you the connection for that end user and what they have available from wherever they're connected in from. So how you can use this information, you can see right away the private IP address of the specific user, which sometimes will give indication as to where they're working from, whether it's a specific location or whether they're working from home. But then you also have the connected via metric here as well too, which will tell you, okay, did they connect in through the NetScaler? Okay, now I know that they're external. Or if they connected in through the storefront server, you'd be able to see that here, and you'd be able to know whether they were internal and external. And in just a click here, you can see exactly what that user's connection is. And in the case that we just showed here, it's quite obvious that at the same time they were having performance issues, it correlated with them also having slow connection speed at home. Right, and that tells you exactly why it's slow, right, or where you need to look, or rules that out. And this is an interesting stuff. Go ahead, Joe. Sorry. No, you're right, John. Yeah, I was just going to say, if we could go back quickly, actually, Joe, because the next question is relevant to this as well. And the question is, some of these, let me reread this. Some of these metrics look a lot like what I get in Director. Is this different? I'll take that one, Joe, actually, because that's a good question. The short answer is a couple of the metrics may appear similar or trigger your memory there. But a couple of the metrics are similar. However, many of them are not. But the main difference, really, frankly, is the fact that Director, while a great utility, of course, gets some good initial information as a free utility. It doesn't give you the end-to-end view needed to tell you exactly what's happening across the entire environment. Citrix, Director, great technology, looking really just at the Citrix stack to tell you whether you're having an issue or not. And so some of the metrics are similar, for sure. Many of them are not included in Director. You'll also see things like the metrics Joe pointed out that are specifically pulled in here that you won't see in some of those technologies, because it gives you the ability to answer questions for remote users, like user connection speed, like network latency being split out on a per user basis. And even folks that have some of the best networking tech monitoring products in the world aren't focused on an individual user and what their individual end user connection speed is for receiver. Mm-hmm. And the only reason that really matters is because it allows you to answer questions that you weren't able to answer before, especially in a situation, an example like this. And that's why Citrix supports and has videos and has come out with videos and various things recommending for organizations, frankly, that have a lot of remote users, that they consider
third-party technologies like Goliath, which provide an end-to-end view and give you the ability to look not just at the Citrix stack, but at everything end-to-end, from the user all the way to the bare metal underlying hypervisor hosts, so that you can actually drill into root cause, which is what it is that we focus on.
Right.
But that's a very good question.
And if I could add as well to John, and to your explanation is perfect. Two of the other things that I think you're not going to see in Director, one is historical data, being able to see user experience metrics. You know, in this case, the session that we're looking at from Maimonides here is from 13 days ago. And all the data here is exactly the same as if it was from real time. So to be able to go back and look historically is really important. Number two, we're bringing everything into a single pane of glass. So like you said, you're getting not only the performance of Citrix, but you're getting everything else into a single pane of glass. In just a couple of clicks, you can find the root cause. And then lastly, if those of you who are using Director, when you click into a user or find a user's page, you're able to see real-time ICA round trip time, which you probably recognize. You're able to see real-time maybe ICA latency. But what you're not able to do is trend that data over the course of that user session, which is very helpful because, as you all know, users don't always have an issue or report an issue in real time. So to be able to click in here and track and trend exactly what this user's performance was for the time frame of their session is really, really powerful, as opposed to just looking at a single point in time where this user may not have been having issues. I can go back and look and definitively say that this user was having a problem at 10:56.
That's a really big point, Joe, because it's not only troubleshooting an issue in the past, like you just said, but even earlier when you were referring to the end user scorecard, that then enables you, if you don't mind pulling that up quickly, again, that also then means you have the ability to report on this in a detailed way, not just so you can say what the user experience is, but why it's that way. And that's something that you can accomplish now in one view and in a detailed report, which wasn't accomplishable before. In the past, it's been, we know we have issues, now what? You don't have to ask that question like that anymore because of exactly what you just said. The ability to track on a detailed basis historically this information, so you can trend it and track outcomes, but also track the why and have that answer readily available. Okay, well, that was most of the questions, and there was some overlap between a few of the questions, so I think we kind of addressed the meat and potatoes of most of them. So at this time, I was going to wind things down, and I just wanted to thank everyone that attended today's webinar. If you have follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And Joe, if you don't mind going to the final page here, as much as I love the scorecard, from a slide, if you could go to the last slide there, just so folks know how they can reach out to us, that'd be great.
Sure thing.
Thank you everyone again for attending. If you'd like to learn more and understand and see more of the Goliath technology or talk to someone, you can reach out to a number of ways. You can ask for a personalized demonstration, perhaps one that's more fulsome or focuses on your use cases and your particular environment. You can trial the technology, actually deploy it into your environment on a subset of it, and see your own data from your own environment and get your hands on the technology. And we also offer other troubleshooting services and remote monitoring and management services. So we can, which for certain organizations have been particularly helpful in meeting you and your team where you are. So happy to tell you more about that later on. You can email us at sales@goliathtechnologies.com, or of course, you could submit something through our website. And of course, we'd be happy to follow up with you and have a conversation. So everyone, thanks again. Have a good rest of your day. And thank you for attending. Bye now.